Hello?
Amie, they're not nice to me. I'm out of the hospital.
What?
They called security on me because they did not want me to keep the phone on.
Hey, welcome to News You Can Use. I'm your host, Brandon Gomez. This is the first part of a series where we're talking about discrimination in healthcare. Today, I'm speaking with Amie, who knows firsthand that discrimination in healthcare can be a matter of life or death. Now, before we get into those details, I do need you to do a few things like subscribing to this channel, tapping that notification bell, and make sure to follow us on all of our social media. Those details are in the description below. So Amie's mother, Shirley, she lives with a heart condition, and recently in February, she went to Windsor Regional Hospital seeking medical care. Amie decided to stay on the phone with her mom to support her. But when her mom arrived at the hospital, she says a nurse in the emergency room would not treat her unless she hung up the phone, and even threatened to call security. Amie says the nurse threatened not to provide her 72-year-old mom medical care. Amie is here today to share her mother's story about how the hospital failed to care for her mother and if race was a factor in her treatment.
I hate this hospital. Every time I come in,
Mom, take a deep breath, please.
Amie, thanks so much for joining me here on News You Can Use.
Thank you for having me.
You have a very, very compelling story that I know that you want to share that your mom experienced dealing with the healthcare system here in Ontario. Talk to me about what happened.
Yeah, so, my mom actually lives in Windsor. I live in the Hamilton region, and my mom has heart problems. She has something called atrial fibrillation, so that's kind of a condition where the heart actually quivers. So she called me, and she's just like, Amie, I'm having this situation. I feel like my heart's going to stop, and I need to go to the hospital. And I was like, oh, okay, like I'm in Hamilton, how can I help you? And she's like, could you just stay on the phone with me? And I'm like, where's dad? Because my dad should be kind of a part of the situation. And he was out. And then I said, since you're scared, you're alone, why don't you just keep me on the phone? That's like a normal thing.
So what happened when she got to the hospital?
Yeah, so she got to the hospital, she got triaged, she kept me on the phone at the whole time, and she was sitting and she was actually waiting for quite some time. And while I was on the phone with her, she said she felt like she was about to pass out, like everything was going to go black. So at that point, I asked her just to go knock on the triage window at the hospital for the nurse to let her know that she's feeling that ill. And this is where it kind of took a turn. So she went up and knocked on that window, and the nurse yelled at her to go sit down. I'm hearing this through the phone, so I say to my mom, I know that was wrong of her, but just sit down. At least they know that you feel like you're about to pass out. And because I did hear her say that she felt like she was going to pass out. And probably within the next couple minutes, all I hear is this nurse telling her that she's not going to triage her if she's on the phone. And I'm kind of in the background going, what do you mean you're not going to triage my mom? And I was like, hello, hi, I'm a nurse. And I asked my mom to actually put me on speaker so I can explain to this nurse that I'm a nurse, I'm there, and really just to kind of give any healthcare information, because if my mom passes out and blacks out, at the very least I can, provide that information. And I was also providing emotional support because nobody was there, like my dad couldn't be there with her. And the next thing I hear is the nurse saying to my mom that she's not going to give her care. And I tell my mom to throw her phone into her bag. And she does, and I think somehow the phone disconnects. And of course now I'm panicking, like I'm terribly scared. And I call her back.
So, I mean, if you're hearing that your mom is going to be denied health care.
So the first thing that came to my mind was actually to pick up my other phone and start recording. So I start recording and I call my mom back, and I hear her screaming, crying, and she's like, if anything happens to me, you guys are going to be responsible. I could hear the nurse in the background saying, I don't care. If you don't put your phone away and turn your phone off, we can't provide you care. So my mom's like, so are you forcing me to leave? And I'm panicked in the background. I'm screaming. And essentially the phone cuts out again. And the next thing I hear from my mom is she's crying, she's panicked, and she's now outside of the hospital. We ended up having to call 911 with my mom outside the emergency steps waiting for care, because essentially the hospital kicked her out.
So you guys called 911, and did they end up attending to your mom?
Yeah, so an ambulance ended up coming. My mom was sitting outside the hospital, and the scariest part was I was afraid that she might pass out and black out, and just nobody would be caring for her, even though they knew that she needed this help and this support. I don't understand why the most important part for someone who's trying to get care was to police her cell phone use.
Why do you think your mom was treated that way?
You know, this is the question I always ask, and I have to say that there is anti-blackness in healthcare. This was actually the second incident, because I said to them, my mom had a similar incident a couple months earlier where she went and she didn't receive treatment. She called me at like 6 o'clock in the morning, so I had to like raise hell. The doctor came in and was like, oh, her blood work wasn't done, her ECG. So like if you say you have a heart problem, they're supposed to do an ECG within 10 minutes. Nothing. She was there for like 12 hours. So she was sitting.
So this wasn't the first time
this
that your
was
mom
the second
experienced.
time. Yeah.
This is the second time she experienced racism at the hospital.
Yeah. And I actually went on Twitter. I have a little bit of a following. I have a little bit of influence because I do some advocacy work, and I do a lot of work in terms of talking about anti-racism in healthcare. And I think for me, it was just shocking that it was actually happening. And we've heard so many countless stories, but again, this was now happening to me and my own family. This person, this individual, looked and judged my mom based on her skin color and decided to take this stance to say, well, if you don't do X, then you don't deserve care. Did
you and your family ever reach out to the hospital in Windsor and try to escalate the situation?
Yes. So we got a call from, I believe it was the Quality and Risk Department. And they're just like, oh, we see that you said something on Twitter. How can we help? And I'm like, I don't want to talk to you.
Right.
Eventually, the director called from Quality and Improvement. I'm like, I don't want to talk to you either. I need to talk to the CEO of this hospital. I need to talk to the president of this hospital.
Did you get a chance to?
So I have. I have been speaking to the president.
What was their response?
Sorry. To be honest,
that
was the first thing. It was sorry, yeah, because they understand that even if it wasn't about racial bias and racial discrimination, a patient who's coming into a hospital to receive care, that's what they should receive.
Has anything happened to this nurse that refused to treat your mom?
So I know that the nurse was off. I don't know if she is still off. I do have her information. I am going to report this nurse to the College of Nurses of Ontario. From what the CEO has told me, that there is some conversation happening at the human resources level. But again, nurses are in union, so there's that whole
layer
union piece
of bureaucracy there. Do you think if you weren't a healthcare professional yourself, that you would have gotten those answers that you've been trying to seek?
Well, honestly, no. I'm also a quality improvement specialist in emergency services, so I think I just kind of lucked out. I understand intricately how the emergency departments are run, and I think that most people don't know how to navigate this space. And you know, my mom is fortunate for me, but the one thing that I feel almost guilty about is how many other Black and racialized individuals or Indigenous individuals come into healthcare and are treated this way, and there's no response. And that's why I try to continue to do the work that I do to make sure that it's not just my mom, it's other people who look like my mom. And then again, just putting pressure on hospitals to do better. Like, one of the things I actually said to the CEO was, it was during Black History Month, and I said, you guys don't even have anything on your website to talk about or celebrate Black history. And he's like, oh, we put something, this time mid-month. And I said, that is unacceptable. We need to talk about racial bias in healthcare. We need to talk about these things and really move towards seeing better healthcare outcomes for Black and racialized individuals, because there is enough anecdotal evidence to suggest that Black individuals and Indigenous individuals suffer more devastating healthcare effects. And this is where I do say that racism in healthcare is deadly.
What does justice look like for you in terms of what your mom experienced?
I think that's a really tough question, because as much as I can help my mom in this moment, right now, she doesn't trust the healthcare system. And I think that's the most devastating impact, because she lives in Windsor. This is the only place that she can go again to seek care. I think justice for me would look like building this into their strategic plan, putting their finances and resources to saying, we need to make improvements and we need to do it now, because it will cost people's lives. That's what accountability and the justice will look like for me and for other racialized people that seek healthcare and have these terrible, terrible experiences.
Amie, thank you so much for sharing your story with me. Promise me you'll come back and we can dive deeper into this, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me and sharing my mom's story, because there's many stories like hers, and we need to fix this. We need to change it.
Hey BG Squad, thanks so much for checking out our channel, and listen to this, we have more great content for you, like this video right here and this video right here. By the way, don't forget to subscribe to this channel right now and tap that notification bell.